Fable 3 is built on a great concept. You need to overthrow a corrupt king, and in the process need to gain the support of all the regions of the fantasy world of Albion. Then, when you finally do manage to take the throne, the game doesn't end. Instead, you have to make decisions about how to rule the realm, balancing what's good for all against what you promised to those who lent their support. Playing Fable 3 should, in theory, test your moral fiber and force you to make some tough decisions. Unfortunately, the game fails at this for a number of reasons.
Enough! How dare you turn against me? Perhaps you believe you should be the one making these decisions.
Fable 3 looks pretty on PC. While it's not going to match some of the most technically advanced games out there, the stylized fantasy art style is applied to everything from the environments to the items and character models. It makes exploration and questing slightly more enjoyable when the story often fails to do so. Speaking of which, the story is uneven, dragging along through the opening 2/3 of the game and then wrapping up in a rush. This makes it really tough to care about the central conflict. But the bigger issue is, aside from characters like your mentor Walter and the evil King Logan, nobody in the game makes much of an impression. Most of the fantasy characters feel flat, which makes it especially tough to care if you follow through on your promises to them or not. As any Fable fan knows, there's a goofy kind of humor about this role-playing series. If you want, you can walk up to a town resident and burp directly in their face. It's good for a laugh, but not much else. You can murder someone in town, then dance with a flirty lady nearby a few minutes later, take her out on a date, and shortly thereafter be married with a kid. The residents of Albion feel more like brainless playthings than people. It's tough to establish any kind of meaningful emotional bond in that kind of environment. There's plenty to do in Fable 3, but so little of it feels like it's worth doing. Finding new weapons would be great if the combat system weren't so overly simplistic. You get a sword, a gun, and a variety of spells. Though you unlock more as you move through, the way you use them never changes. You'll rarely have to put any thought into a fight, since pretty much every encounter can be cleared by mashing the attack and roll buttons. For a game that makes such a big deal about the freedom of choice, there's surprisingly little built into the gameplay. Other elements of Fable 3, from the property ownership metagame to the decisions you'll need to make as king at the end, feel underdeveloped. It's nice that you can purchase and profit from owned property, but the customization options aren't especially robust. It's hard to feel any significant sense of attachment to the buildings you've purchased. Even worse is how few decisions need to actually be made at the end of the game. With so much of Fable 3 spent building the anticipation of taking the throne, Lionhead only inputted a handful of climactic decision points. There are some creative quests sprinkled in here and there, but they're not enough to alleviate the sense of disappointment that sets in once the credits roll. Fable 3 starts out with noble goals and features high production values throughout, but fails to achieve anything of significance. It's hard to care about a majority of the game's generic personalities, the story is inconsistent, and the climactic moments are poorly handled. Toss in a shallow, unsatisfying combat system, and it's difficult to stay interested in pursuing all the hidden items and quest lines. Fable 3 is a functional role-playing game with some nice visuals, but one that, despite its grand aspirations, can't manage to leave more than a fleeting impression. For more on Fable 3 on PC, head over to IGN.com.